A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Spectrum. We are coming to you live on Radio 1 FM 90. Radio 1 is broadcasting from the Central Building here in the heart of our city, Kampala. We are live on our website, www.radio1fm90.com. You click on the icon with the word Listen Live. Now, you can also find this radio station, the different radio listening apps, which you can obtain from the App Store of your smartphone. All you have to do is to have an internet connection. You download, look for Radio 1 FM 90, and wherever you are, you'll be able to listen to our quality programming. My name is Kenneth Anderson Lukwago, your host. Today we'll be looking at Africa and the digital age, and the question we're asking, are we being left behind? Now, Uganda is hosting the 6th edition of Africa, Data Fest Africa, an event which will be starting tomorrow and will be taking place at the National ICT Hub, where different stakeholders from Africa, experts in this particular field, will be gathering to discuss a number of issues. The theme is Reclaiming Our Data Futures, which seeks to position different aspects, including rights, development, and so many other things, including innovations that we hear about that are coming up left, right, and center. Now, Africa has a young population, but some of the issues to do with technology and the digital age are not appreciated in some countries. But many people say if we don't do that, actually, we might be left behind. So what I did today, I brought the organizers here and some experts to discuss this critical issue, because without it, we may be left behind in terms of development and that transformation that we are looking at. Now, let me introduce my guests. Mr. Emmanuel Chagara, CEO of Lima Security, is a cybersecurity consultant. Good evening. It's a pleasure having you on Spectrum.
Good evening.
Also in studio, we have Ms. Brenda Namata. She's a program manager, gender and strategic initiatives at Policy Uganda. Welcome to Spectrum.
Thank you. Good evening, listeners.
In studio, we also have Mr. Philip Ayazika, is the director of programs from the Policy Data Institute, same organization like Brenda. Good evening. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Wilson.
Also in studio, we have a visitor all the way from Zimbabwe, and she's Miss Varizo Matimba. She's AI Africa lead at Male Tech Initiative. Good evening. It's a pleasure having you on Spectrum.
Thank you. Good evening.
And let's begin briefly by understanding what Data Fest Africa is all about. And I want to begin with you, Philip. Very quickly, if you can bring us to speed, what exactly are we looking at? What kind of people are going to gather, and what kind of discussions should we expect there? And maybe some outcomes as a country, Uganda.
Thank you, Kenneth, for having us today. Good evening, listeners. I hope all of you are well and have had a good day. My name is Philip Ayazika, joining you from Kampala, Uganda. I work with an organization called Policy. So Policy, we function at the intersection of data, design, and technology. Our work focuses on how we can support African people. Mainly we do work with women and girls to see that we take back control of our data and reimagine new ways of technology ownership. Now, there's quite a lot to unpack in there, and that's exactly why we're having Data Fest this year. Data Fest Africa is a celebration of data, right? As a continent, or as the global south, as you might call it, as even Uganda and the region in East Africa, we still face quite a lot of challenges in terms of public service delivery, in terms of access to services, in terms of issues of health, issues of education, and a lot of times we've been told that technology is the solution, and we've seen it work in other areas across the continent. But at the center of technology is the question of technology, right? For technology, for technology to be able to work for us, to inform health developments, to inform agriculture and improve agriculture, we need data, right? Data is anything. A lot of us, of course, when we're in school, they say data is information or raw information, right? So when the Uganda Bureau of Standards collects information through the census, that is data, right? When you are moving into a bank and they ask for your details, your national ID to open for your bank account, that is data. When you are moving into, for my fellow young people, when you're moving into, maybe a bar or something in the COVID times, and they asked you to write in a book, to write your name, your national ID, where you're coming from. I think remember that the president gave a directive during COVID-19 for border riders and barbers to collect data. Why? Because they know that when they have that data, then they're able to trace and make certain decisions, right? So with such data, then they're able to plan for the economy. But we continue to see that even with the much data that is being collected, there's little to no progress. Of course, there's progress that is being made, but vis-a-vis some of the issues that we do have in the community, there's more that needs to be done. So with Data Face Africa, we are going to be bringing different stakeholders, and we're saying Data Festival, it's to celebrate the use cases of data. What has data been able to do for us? So we're going to be bringing various stakeholders, including government. We are going to be joined by the Personal Data Protection Office, and we do know that Uganda has the Personal Data Protection Act, which is one of the guiding laws that we do have on how data should be used equitably, but also to make sure that people get value out of it. We're going to be joined by civil society, donors, academics, students, and private industry sectors at the National ICT Hub to see where are we as a country, to take stock. Where are we as a country? Where do we fit into the region? And what must we do to make sure that we get the best out of data?
You raise a very important issue. Where are we as a country? Let me bring in Mr. Chagara here. You are a key player in the ICT sector, in the digital space, as a cybersecurity expert. When you look at the issues of the digital age, where are we as Africa, but even as Uganda in particular?
Well, in terms of data access, we are at a very early stage in terms of use or even acknowledging the value of data. But it's important for us to note that Africa actually produces very large volumes of data on a daily basis in billions of terabytes. You understand? But how to harness this data is one of the biggest struggles that many institutions are facing, whether be it for innovation or for governance or for public access, for whatever purposes. You find that there is still a very big struggle there. Now, the biggest advantage that we have right now is, since we still have the opportunity to shape how we take advantage of this data, we can shape our path, whether be it through the lines of regulations and policy, because there's already that big conflict between how much data can we make available vis-a-vis what is the question on data privacy and the rights and all of that. And there is that big conflict. But we can achieve both, you see that. So in terms of our maturity, we are still at a very early stage in terms of access, but I think that there are so many opportunities in terms of, from a governance or even from private sector perspective on how we can leverage this data. Africa leapfrogged from about 3% internet access in 2008 to about 30% in 2025. That already demonstrates just how much we have now more access to data as Africa. More people are going online. In Uganda alone, we have about 23 million Ugandans that have smartphones. Okay, these guys are contributing to data every day, whether you know it or not. As long as you're going online and using social media and all of that, we have about 48% internet penetration rate. These are key indicators of how much data we are actually pushing publicly. Now, the only question is, how do we harness such value? How do we consolidate all of this that we have together and create sense out of it? That's the opportunity that we have right now, and that's the kind of conversation we should be having. All right.
Let me go to Brenda. Mr. Chagara says, the challenge is, how do we harness? How do we know even what works for us? Because there are so many things out there. Looking at the challenges that are in Uganda, would you say that we are taking the relevant steps to solve some of these issues using data? What are you seeing from even the side of innovation, utilization, and even what he has actually said, harnessing and using it for purposes that are meaningful?
Okay, thank you. I think one of the challenges that still limits Uganda as a country and a number of African countries as far as data is concerned and its utilization is the gap in inclusion of people, making data to be facing the people or people-centric, in the fact that the communities are not involved in shaping data processes within the respective African countries, especially in Uganda, to have the right to know what information am I providing or what data am I providing, whom am I providing this data for, at what point do I own it, what am I going to benefit out of this data, and how does it include me at the end as far as policies are concerned and the programming or different programs that we get both from government and from the different different government players. And in that is the failure of recognizing inclusivity and intersectionality in communities, that you would find us, the elite, we are able to understand the processes and even hold a right and assert on that right. But a number of people that constitute the biggest population in our countries have a minimal understanding, what we call data literacy, to know the extent to which they can be able to participate in these processes. So you have a hesitancy in a number of these people participating, thus creating a data gap, inclusive data gap, or what we call a gender gap in data. And then the second aspect of it is that when we have this information, the loss of right in terms of how one is going to benefit, especially the very marginalized groups like women in communities, they many times do not participate because of, again, the limitation in exposure to information as far as the media ecosystem is concerned, to be educated. And then secondly, the entities that do collect this information not having the bother, and in fact even government putting a pressure on them to be able to conduct data literacy, educate the user or the provider of this information before you involve them into this process. And I think last to that is the issue of ownership. At what point do I withdraw this information? We have seen a number of times that, for example, especially again the least literate about these processes are more affected in community. That we see the banking sector, even government entities as a whole, like NIRA, for example, in Uganda, we are having a process whereby we are updating our national IDs. But at what point does someone be able to retract the information, personal data that I provided you earlier in the last process, to update it to date? At what point am I able to, like someone as government and the different players, to be able to act rightfully in the sense of benefit for me at the end? So where we get it wrong is the point of inclusion of people at the point of process and benefit as far as the African countries are concerned, and more especially in Uganda, where we have exclusion of the least informed on these processes.
That means that the uptake is also limited because of that particular situation that you're painting.
Oh, yes, yes.
Now, one other very important issue that we are seeing as far as technology is concerned is the advancement in, innovations and things like that. And at the moment, the whole world is talking about the AI age. While you're still thinking about what you have today, people have reached an extent of developing, technology. For instance, somebody does not have to walk a distance. They can send something, a machine, to actually go and do certain things. We have seen some innovations in Rwanda when it comes to healthcare, where they are using drones and the AI equipment to actually deliver some of the equipment to the hard-reaching areas. But let me bring in Ms. Matimba from Zimbabwe. You are the expert on issues of AI. When you look at Africa, are we not lagging behind?
I don't think Africa is lagging behind, because I think we're making a very progressive effort in terms of the regulation of it all.
Regulation?
Yes, so I think that while we can critique the process, but I think it's great to acknowledge that we are actually doing a good step by actually regulating. I think as of now, about maybe 13 countries or so have got national AI strategies, either published, and then others are still developing them. So I think we are not lagging behind. However, I think the onset of AI does not take away some of the key things or some of the societal issues that were existent. So, and I think that the manner in which sometimes we approach the AI conversation is as if AI is supposed to transform some of our already existing problems. I think when we're talking about in the digital front, we're talking about issues of connectivity. The bulk of the African continent is not connected at the moment. So it means that, like, if we're going to talk about AI, let's also be proactive in fixing the other issues that actually impact, for example, representation of women on the internet. At the same time, I think that we may be behind in terms of defining how we want AI to function for Africans. I think while we have released the AI continental strategy, released by the African Union, countries still are yet to define what African AI should look like. AI also, our languages are also not online. Many African languages I don't know how many languages, local languages there are in Uganda, but maybe they're 66, and maybe there probably might be barely there online. So we do have a problem of a lag in African AI datasets, which means that then our languages cannot be archived or preserved, or AI cannot work for us the way it works for other languages. So yeah.
But when you look at where technology is going, if you're given an opportunity, because there is always a starting point. As we speak now in other countries, they are doing completely different things. What kind of AI technology would you advise a country like Uganda to give priority, looking at the challenges the African states face?
I don't know if I could recommend only one AI tool to a government, but I think that national priorities definitely differ per country, and national strategic priorities also differ. However, I think that at this point, probably I wouldn't advise the technology, but I'd probably advise the assessment and the benchmarking of whether the technology fits. For Uganda, for example, like whatever technology that we're trying to do we have measures, or do we have a framework through which we can evaluate, is this AI tool right for Uganda? So what I would say African countries need to be investing in, it's ways to benchmark and assess the suitability and applicability of AI tools that are currently being deployed on the continent.
All right. Philip, back to DataFest, the event which is beginning tomorrow. What are some of the key issues that you're likely to discuss and resolve in this meeting that would help the African countries to take a leap or move forward in terms of the digital age and the issues that we're discussing around this table?
Thank you, Wilson. Kenneth, sorry. So quite a lot of things. So the conversation that is starting tomorrow actually has started today, because we've had a couple of events and engagements that will go on until Friday. We'll tackle quite a lot of things. So, and I want to add to it, to what Ms. Varizo has been talking about AI, also not to be pessimistic and say there's nothing that is being done. We are making progress. Like I said earlier on, there is a law in Uganda, the National Data Protection Act. There's been processes that have been led by the Ministry of ICT and the UN Global Pulse and different stakeholders around the national data strategy to be able to fit into these continental frameworks that are coming out. I think one of the key issues that is going to visibly come out is the question of power, right? As a continent, we continue to be consumers of technology and data products, right? You asked earlier on around the issue of innovation. I think, numbers are very clear. Uganda is one of the most entrepreneurial countries, right? Young people are doing things, but a lot of those things don't scale, right? There is a data issue in there as well, right? We could throw money at them, we could do all these things, but there is a data question there, right? What data are young people using to inform the innovations they're working with? So in an ecosystem where there's no free flow of data, but also where countries in the region or on the continent don't have clear, strong data protection laws, right? Then you find a problem that even there is a mistrust between states on how we can share data. It's exactly why we've had the ESC roll out a lot of initiatives that are supposed to base off data, but they have not been able to work out because we still exist in a framework that has weak legal frameworks. We've been talking about standardization. How can we get to a point where the process by me being able to move to Kenya with my national ID and not a passport, that's what we call the free continental trade area, and people being able to cross borders, goods being able to cross borders. Is that a question, right? If Kenya and Uganda, by the fact that I'm using my national ID to cross over, I can use my driving permit to drive in Tanzania and Kenya. It's a question of data that Kenya has my data and they can verify that I'm a citizen and I'm eligible to drive. We also saw it during the COVID times. Where we're talking about truck drivers that were crossing across borders, and they had to pay money in Kenya and then they had to pay money in Uganda. They had to do COVID tests, and it was a simple question of let's share data. So some of the issues that are going to be coming up is how do we as a continent talk about sharing data? For us to be able to share data and people to be able to realize a borderless Africa that we need, that we've been talking about for a long time, we're going to have to get to a point where we agree that these are the standards that we need for Africa when it comes to data. A lot of the data protection laws on the continent, again, we say this over and over, have copied the GDPR, the Global Data Protection Regulations. But we're saying, can Africa stakeholders, the data protection offices, the ministries of ICTs, the ministries of the digital economy ministries, etc. Can they sit together with the different stakeholders, right? The ones that we're going to have on platforms like DataFest, and talk about these are standards that work for Africa. Let's not copy laws, but let's agree that Africa is unique. These are standards that do work for us, and let's be able to share data so that we can open up borders. Innovators can use better data to inform their innovations. Otherwise, you have me developing an application, but it's only speaking to the context of Uganda. So my application is not able to cross Uganda and work for people in Rwanda or work for people in Kenya. Yet we continue consuming platforms like Facebook and these very many platforms that are working for us in education, in health, that don't speak to our context. That is one. Secondly, I think is a question of, and I'm wrapping up, is a question of digital rights. Digital and data rights. I think for our listeners to know, they all must know that as a data subject, as people that are giving data to the government, we give our data to you, boss. You give your data to NIRA, to banks. You have rights as a citizen. Yeah, you can decide that I'm going to withdraw my data. You can decide that I can correct my data at no cost, right? So even as a recommendation, we are saying, whereas we know that some of these processes can be expensive, but I think it's I don't want to use the word immoral, but it's wrong for NIRA to say that someone should pay an exorbitant price to be able to correct their NIRA details, because that is limiting them from accessing services. So even with things like digital IDs, how can we make sure that they're inclusive and that everyone can access some of these digital identification tools, data identification tools that are coming up to be able to access services?
All right, Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. It's at that point when we go for a break. But I do encourage you to share with us your thoughts via the WhatsApp line 0703-090-090. It could be a question or comment, and the experts here in studio will be handy in responding to you. Our topic of discussion today, we are looking at Africa and the digital age. Are we being left behind? This in relation to DataFest Africa 2025, a meeting that is going to bring together different players in the digital space to discuss how Africa can leap forward and also address some of its challenges, the theme being reclaiming our data futures. Stay tuned, Radio 1 FM 90, because we'll continue after this break. Well, you're glad that you're still with us on Spectrum, live on Radio 1 FM 90, broadcasting from the Central Building, the heart of our city, Kampala. Our topic of discussion today, we are looking at Africa and the digital age. Are we being left behind? Now, this discussion is in line with tomorrow's event. It will be an event tomorrow and on Friday at the National ICT Hub. That event is known as DataFest Africa 2025, being hosted by Policy Data Institute and other partners, and there will be delegates from different parts of the African continent to discuss issues to do with digital space and what actually needs to be done on the African continent to, among other things, reclaim data features. I'm speaking to four guests here in studio. They are experts in this area. Mr. Emmanuel Chagara, CEO of Mlima Security, is a cybersecurity expert. Ms. Varizo Matimba, she's an AI Africa lead from Mel Technologies. She comes from Zimbabwe. Mr. Philip Ayazika, Director of Programs, Policy Data Institute, and Ms. Brenda Namata, Program Manager, Gender and Strategic Initiatives, also from Policy Data Institute. Now, during the course of discussion, I realized that there's something very important as we're sharing our data, like Mr. Ayazika concluded in his submission, that we have rights and also somehow responsibilities. Why is this very important? It's what they call cybersecurity issues. And I want to bring in Mr. Chagara because he's an expert in this particular area. And as Ugandans who continuously share their data or use the data from other sources, what should we be aware of when it comes to issues of cybersecurity?
Well, so firstly, it's very important for us to recognize the value that the data has, and that's why this conversation is very vital. But at the center of this is still human lives. And today, when we think about cybersecurity, we don't just think about it from a concept of protecting assets, information assets. We think about it also from the protection of people. If I can steal data that is identifiable to you, I can compromise you extensively. there are various forms of data breaches that we have been witnessing globally. Recently, we saw Google lost about 198 million records of personal identifiable information. We saw the hack on AWS and all these other hacks that are happening back and forth. Now, similarly, even us in Uganda here, we witnessed the same. So the case of cyber attacks are continuously happening, while at the same time we're talking about the need for data. So, and this is something that I brought earlier, where do we draw the line between access to data and the privacy? And like Philip mentioned quite a lot around the issues around regulation. For any effective cybersecurity program, there has to be the concept of regulation and strong policies, besides, of course, the other aspects of training and public awareness and putting in place the right infrastructure. For Uganda, we have the Data Protection Act, which is a very, very strong law enacted in 2019 at the backdrop of the Africa Cybersecurity Convention, which was hosted in Malabo in 2014. Out of that convention, African Union members agreed to all pass regulations around data protection and privacy. Today, about 39 of them have gone ahead to pass these laws. So you see that there is effort towards the concern of privacy and security. So we cannot think about data access without thinking about security. But at the same time, security should not be at the expense of access to data. Because this conversation should not steer us to the point of saying, oh, then let us not provide any data, let us hold everything back. No, then we stifle ourselves. We're talking about capabilities in terms of innovation, ability to govern better, ability to provide the best services for our people. My colleague here from policy talked about access to data for the underprivileged. So the thing that many times we forget is the aspect of what data is mine and where do I have my rights. So when we have this conversation, then we now introduce the question around security. Now, the big problem that many times we have when we are striking a balance between these two is to say, okay, you have it. But that's not what we're saying. Whenever there are very clear policies on data protection and especially data collection, issues around aggregation of data, issues around anonymization of data, we can make information and data available without compromising security. There can be that middle ground. So now the question of that there was a data leakage that led to 198 million records of personal identifiable information. When I use the word personal identifiable information, I mean that if I look at this data, I can say this is for Philip. You see that, and that's where the problem is. So the conversation now is, how do we introduce necessary controls that allows for effective data governance, that allows for effective data collection, that allows for clean handling, anonymization, aggregation, and all of these things, while not compromising the liberties that we can enjoy with this freedom of access. You see that. Still on the same line, we see questions around tiered and access to data. Governments can now introduce frameworks where not all data can be made public. Of course, we know that. Okay, but we can tier and say such is what can be publicized, while this one here we can hold back. So the conversation, therefore, in the line of cybersecurity really comes down to the training and awareness. The data handlers, the governors, and all of these guys who are harnessing these large volumes of data, are they aware of their responsibilities? Do they know what is required of them? Do they understand what it means to leak data vis-a-vis disclosing information about maybe the state of a certain affairs? Recently, we conducted a study on the state of cyber and fraud in Uganda. We harvested information from about 46 financial institutions, government regulatory bodies, development partners, and the rest. But you can't find a single information that is mapped to any of them, and yet this information is going to be made public. So the responsibility around protection is something that really comes down to training and awareness.
All right.
People need to be aware of their responsibility, and the law is quite clear. It prescribes the responsibility of a data handler,
data controller. And these are things that we need to be aware of.
All right. Brenda, I want to come to you in terms of cybersecurity. You handle issues related to gender and strategic initiatives. When you talk about gender, we have challenges in Uganda here, issues to do with cyberbullying. People are attacked, privacy and a number of things. Before you know it, your picture is trending, maybe a video or something that happened. In that particular context, do you think as a country, as Ugandans, we are responsible enough? Do we understand our rights? Do we understand our responsibility, even as we engage in this digital era?
I think there's a limited understanding of online user rights as far as the public is concerned. To what extent? I know we always pride in the freedom of expression, but there's the importance of understanding that freedom of expression comes with responsibility and obligation to other online users or other people that you exist with in society. And that is one of the challenge or limitation that we are facing increasingly in digital spaces or with the misuse of technology. As a country, we have a fairly responsive law as far as online misuse is concerned, and that is through our Computer Misuse Act as amended. But the challenge there comes with the issue of gender responsiveness, to be able to capture the specifications that affect women differently from men as far as the digital spaces are concerned. Research proves that 1 in 2 women face online abuses differently through cyberbullying, cyberstalking, to mention but a few. The problem that lies there then that there's a generalization of the law, not to be able to capture that a woman is differently attacked online because they are women anyway. And at the second level of that is the enforcement, the weakness in enforcement of the law. Unfortunately, a number of the laws that we have in the country that respond to freedom of expression and the issue of technology and its misuse are selectively implemented or selectively enforced. If it does not appear political, it does not have an issue to be responded to by forces. And at least a number of people have lost out to benefit from the law as far as its enforcement is concerned, because they're either not prominent enough or it is not political in nature. At that also is the issue of those that are affected, their awareness and understanding of the presence of structures that can be able to support them. We cannot say all is dark. As a country, at least we have a number of structures that have been put in place within the security forces to be able to support with the issue of computer misuse or technology misuse, from the UCC or the Uganda Communications Commission, where you can be able to file in a complaint if you have been attacked online and you would be helped. Also through the different police structures that we have in the country. The challenge there lies in how many Ugandans know the availability of these channels to take advantage of them. How many of them can be able to access these channels and actually utilize them to their benefit? And at the very worst of that, do we have the right capacity within these structures to be able to understand and address or respond to issues of cybersecurity? As much as they understand the law, do they know how to rightfully enforce it? Or it comes from a point of having generic knowledge or capacity from within the different structures that we have, and they are put within the cyber unit forces? Lastly, in that is the bit of, I think it's also a responsibility on the side of civil society, the private sector and government, to take it upon ourselves to have digital literacy in terms of building capacities of communities, especially those that are very marginalized in online spaces like women, to understand the digital right, where the violation lies, and how they can be able to access the right in terms of benefiting them as far as the available laws are concerned. And of course, the endless conversation that we are having within the country with the different gender reforms that are being proposed, and even the UCC Act that is under proposal of amendment, to see that it captures and it is very deliberate to respond to issues of technology facilitated gender-based abuse. We are saying the abuse exists online, but there's a differentiation in its manifestation and the need of deliberate response when it comes to women vis-a-vis men online.
All right. Let's go to the AI expert. Also still issues of security. And there's a biggest fear that AI can be abused left, right, and center. It's actually one of the key issues people are concerned about. And everywhere, even here in the country. They talk about the need to actually regulate it even before it is introduced, but we know it's already here. In terms of security, should we be concerned that AI can pose a danger? Do we need to be careful how we actually apply it?
Well, AI is data sets, and the data sets, it doesn't operate independently. The data sets are fed into by the people. So I think that we really need to care about what goes into the data set as a first step. I also don't think we should ever operate from an alarmist point of view where we worry about whether it's going to replace us, because it's people that feed into those data sets. So yeah, those are my immediate thoughts around that.
All right. And then maybe as we move forward, there are some comments that are coming in from the listeners, and I would like to sample some of them. But before I do that, I want to come back to you, Philip. And even as we talk about digital space, we understand the cost implications. Certain things are really expensive for us, as you know. As Africans, you know, sometimes it's not easy to deal with this technology. How do we address that kind of situation? Is it possible that we can come together as a continent and do, initiatives or special projects that can take us to another level, maybe at the East African level, countries collaborating? Is it something you're looking at, collaboration between entities, organizations, to be able to help in actually promoting these issues that we are looking at?
Thank you, Kenneth. So, that's a very good question. I think that's exactly why we need to have the conversation of data. Because I think where there is the rightful use of data, we've seen better use of resources. Okay? And that's the only premise why, you boss is charged with the task to, do a census every other time. Of course, we do have issues. We say this should have been like this, but again, they have the national mandate to do that. Of course, last year when they did the census, is it this year? Last year, we saw tribes coming out to say, "Oh, we're undercounted. Oh, this and this." There's a reason in that, right? Whereas we keep talking about low data literacy levels, and even the people complaining that we were undervalued or undercounted. I think just at that point you understand that even people know that there's power in numbers, right? Every time you are visible in a number, in a data set, it's important, because then resources are well allocated, etc. That is how the government is able to know that, okay, we're going to spend more money on health, or on security, or on this, or in this tribe, or in this country, or on these priorities, right? Now, to get back to your question on, can we come back together? I think let me come back from, the continental level to Uganda here. And I want to give a very clear example. I think in this work we've been talking about data interoperability. Things have changed a bit now, but there's a couple of years ago, even now in certain government agencies, and I hope this can be a recommendation. We've seen over and over that when I go to the bank to open a bank account, I'm asked for a letter from the LC. They want all these details, the same details that NIRA has, okay? And then I'll go to or get a passport, same details. LC letter, of course it has changed now, but we've seen it. Driving permit, same information. Election register could be the same information. So this is the data that we're talking about. Now, with data interoperability, what could be the benefit that comes out of government institutions, government ministries, departments, and agents collaborating, right? We do have a law, we do have frameworks. It's a matter of sitting and saying, okay, we do have this data in our systems, right? I think every time you open up, a loophole, avenues like those days, then that's how data breaches come about.
Multiple sharing of data.
Exactly. So with data interoperability, every time there's sharing of data and putting together infrastructure, realize that then maybe Ministry of ICT won't need a different server. There's better use of resources, right? So to answer your question, can we come together and do something? Definitely. Starting at a national level, yes, there's power in that collaboration. I also want to speak about, for that collaboration to happen, I talked about earlier on the need for there to be harmonized laws, right? Because we continue to see that even when we're asking for collaboration, there's different departments at different levels, same as countries, right? We've previously seen certain ministries in Uganda publishing people's personal data, right? On their websites, name, where the person stays, and that could be dangerous. I think that's what Mr. Chagara was talking about, that is dangerous. We are no longer talking about data and security as an issue of, protecting assets, but rather protecting individuals because it could put them in harm's way. I'll give you an example that one day you're seated there and then you receive a message from Bet Power or Fortibet, but you don't even watch soccer. How is that? That is a data breach, right? How do they have your information? And now we know that if someone has your national ID, and I see people posting their national IDs on Facebook, I forgot my national ID, posting their children. This is all data. Data it is your name, it is your iris, it is your thumbprint. This is all data. So people need to pay attention to all these things. I think, let me end with just one example and I'll wrap up. So we've seen lots of data breaches. And I might be getting out of the way here, but I think it's important.
It's very important because it's part of cybersecurity.
Yes. You go to a Rolex store. I don't know if you know what a Rolex is. You should test it as it's one of our delicacies. And then, and I think this is important because we have a museum at Data Fest that we put together that shows some of the intricacies around data and things that people should pay attention to. And you go to buy a Rolex and they wrap it in a paper and you realize this is someone's HIV results. Have you seen that?
Not only that, you go to a lady who is selling pancakes or cassava around the street, and there are contacts of people on a list and their names.
Where do they get this information? These are when you talk about data breaches, Mr. Chagara talked about Google and AWS. These are data breaches, and we do have a law. And when I was talking about rights, individuals can actually sue. There's procedures right now to sue and whistleblow through the Personal Data Protection Office in Uganda. So we've seen breaches like those. I think we've also seen advances when it comes to the use of data. I think in the very last phase that we're coming out of, where we're getting national IDs, the only biometric that was used was the thumbprint, right? But then we know that there's people that do not have limbs, they don't have hands. So what does that mean for service delivery for those people? Because for you to get a passport, for you to get medicine, for you to do this, you need a national ID. So where does that leave people like us, right? But we've seen that in this era, and that's a lot of advocacy that has been done by a lot of people. Policies, IPESA, Milima, and all the other partners, saying that when we're talking about data and digital transformation, inclusion is very important. That we have people that don't speak, or people that don't see, we have people that can't write, need go to school. These are all avenues of inclusion that need to be paid attention to. Now we're seeing that NERA this time around has included the iris. For those that have renewed their national IDs, that beyond taking your thumbprint, they're now scanning your eye to see, because this is also data. So these are very important aspects that, as we talk about collaboration and sharing data, that things should be paid attention to. Data infrastructure. Okay? Data infrastructure is one of the reasons why we're still lagging behind also. Where are the servers located? In the case of 2007 in Kenya, where the court cancelled the elections, and then when they were arguing the case of Baba Raila Odinga, rest in peace, where he was contesting the election results, I remember the council, I don't know if that's the right legal language, asked the lawyers that can we have access to the database?
Can we audit?
Can we audit and have access to the election database? And the lawyer said, unfortunately, we cannot. I think that was the government lawyer. We cannot because the people in France who have this access to this data are sleeping. What does that mean? Right? How are we going to move past colonialism and make decisions around our data and innovate around our data when we don't have the right infrastructure to store this data? So, is it cheaper? Definitely it's cheaper when we're sharing data and across borders, but we need some of these things to be put in place for people to. So even as we have the conversation around that, government needs to pay attention to local languages. I think a lot of our data as a continent is oral. That is why in a lot of our cultures, there was the passing on of the rights. There was someone who knew all the history of the culture.
Through storytelling.
Exactly. And they passed it on to someone before they died. We are not a written continent, right? So even civil society and everyone, let's find out alternative ways to document and increase access to information, because we are an oral continent. A lot of our culture, that's why songs are disappearing, culture is disappearing, because we think everything must be in a PDF. So I think it calls us to think beyond what has been done as always, to think about what are our unique contexts as a continent. I think that's how we're going to get the best.
Actually, before I move away from you, there's a comment that comes in from George Chibike, who is listening in from Uganda district. He says, thanks, Philip, for insights. Uganda is experiencing ever-increasing cases of human trafficking, which is a crime. What steps have been advanced in technology, tracking the location of victims, and to aid in their rescue operations, applying technology or innovations to be able to solve some of the problems? Are we there yet?
Greetings to you, Mr. Chivike. Mr. Chivike is Executive Director of Community Restoration Initiative Project. Thank you for that question. So, I've done work in the trafficking sector. I think we just concluded. I've supported on a report by the Freedom Collaborative through the Eastern Horn of Africa Trafficking Network that brings together different. And that's a very good question, because when we're talking about human trafficking and safe migration, etc., even perpetrators are getting online, right? And even beyond trafficking, I think the data question is very important. That Uganda has a lot of porous borders, but you won't know where to put more reinforcement if you don't have the data. So to answer your question, Mr. George, I might not get deep into it, but definitely there's a place for innovation in countering trafficking.
All right, we have a comment coming in from Okama Emmanuel, who is listening in from Mukono municipality. He says, Uganda in particular is digitally advancing, but the digital base is not very firm. I don't know what he means. Chagara, would you like to weigh in as we come towards the end of this discussion?
That is quite an interesting thought, and I'm going to just loosely weigh in, but I would like to invite Doreen, maybe to Brenda. Yeah. When he says the digital base is not very strong, I don't want to imagine what he means by that. But as we started the conversation, we talked about how we are at the onset of harnessing the value of our data. We generate our data through multiple sources, through our daily interaction with social media, through the emails you send, through the questions you ask on internet. When you go on Google and you type your stuff, you're contributing to data. Philip has talked about use of data, say through geolocations, mapping of locations, using data for weather forecast and all these things. And I must say that there is good progress along those lines. There have been various efforts towards, say, open street mapping, all these other forms of data contribution. So there is effort along those lines. Okay. Are we there yet? Certainly not. All right. I think there is a lot that we can still do.
Brenda, in a minute.
Yes, I think I would imagine the technology base not being very strong at a level of exclusion. That you ask a question in terms of, if we are having technological innovations in Uganda or in Africa, where's the local investment as far as these local innovations are concerned? There's a challenge of urbanization of technology, that a lot of the technological promotion or technology promotion is largely happening within the urban areas of the different cities or different parts of the country, but not spreading across to the rural areas. When you speak about even inclusivity, the inclusion only happens at the level of the literate compared to those that are less illiterate. So I'd imagine that now when he speaks about the technological base being weak, it's sort of asks for a recommendation. How can we do better? It is trying to advance to the government to see that while we are promoting technology, while we are catching up with technology as Africa, we must ensure that it is inclusive. It does not stop in the urban areas, but it spreads across the country, involving all people across board, because at the end we either benefit from technology or we contribute into technology through data.
All right, I'll come to you for the last word, Ms. Matimba. Your closing remarks as we come to the end of this show. What are you looking forward tomorrow as Data Face Africa begins?
I am definitely looking forward to a space for cross-pollination of knowledge. It's going to be a place where many people from different countries are going to share what exactly they are doing when it comes to how we're going to reclaim our futures as Africans. This is really a good space for us to brainstorm and think with all these issues that we're facing, extending even to issues of climate. We have a space where we can actually interrogate, what does the digital age, what do our data futures look like? What does it mean for creators? Does it mean for technologies? What does it mean for kids? So I really look forward to a space where we are able to discuss those and actually map a way forward.
All right, with that we come to the end of this show. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for creating time to be here. And thank you very much, dear listeners, for tuning in and contributing to this discussion. Good luck with Data Face Africa. And I hope that after the meeting, there will be resolutions that will help us to transform our digital spaces, but also be able to reclaim our data going forward. I've been your host, Kenneth Anderson Lukwago. Stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90, because the news in English is up next with Miss Josephine Takano. Thereafter, the Soul Train with BB Jr.